What's up everyone, it's Kenji here, and in this video I'll go over all of my internships, explaining why I did them and what I learned from them. So let's get into it. And thank you to Trends for sponsoring this video. So here's the 4 years I had available in my university's business program, and I knew that the last two were gonna be the most important internship-wise as they were closest to graduation. For the first two, I had two main goals. Firstly, to try to build up my resume and have something attractive for the third and the fourth year. And secondly, to try and experiment and see what I liked the most. Starting off with my very first internship, and that was in the summer between my first and my second year of university. Because I was very young, my resume looked pretty empty to be honest. The only experience I had was working at a packaging company the summer prior. So let's just say I wasn't a very attractive candidate. Among the few skills that I had was that I spoke languages, so I put them to good use by working at a hotel where there were guests from around the world. Specifically, I worked as a bellman at a Marriott hotel. Although at face value, you might just think I was picking up luggage, and that was indeed the case, my process was that if I could tie this to a more corporate role where I wanted to get into in the future, it would do well for my resume. So I pitched this as something where I worked as a team, I improved my interpersonal communication as I was talking with the guests all the time, and I provided good customer service as it was a 5-star hotel after all. All of these skills I felt were applicable to any office role, whether you're working as a banker, a consultant, or a lawyer. At the end of the day, you work as part of a team, you try to communicate things clearly, and you want to provide value to the customer. So I knew that as a first internship, where I really couldn't get too picky, it was gonna be a good foundation. By the time I was back in university for my second year, I wanted to get a corporate internship, so one in an office basically. And that's when I found out about Insight Weeks, which were 1 to 2 week long pre-internship programs that would then fast track you to a summer internship the following year. By fast track, I mean that you could receive an internship offer way before the application portal was even open to the general public, just because you had impressed in the Insight program. In these programs, you learn about the company, you get to shadow a few employees, and you have a final project or two that you need to present. Here's JP Morgan's description of theirs, for example. It says it's 3 days, and at the bottom you can see that participants may be fast-tracked for interviews for our summer internships. So with this new discovery, I began applying to a ton of them, but I was actually rejected by pretty much all. This triggered me to start contemplating transferring universities so I'd have a more competitive resume, but more on that later. I did get one lucky break though. At Bloomberg, they decided to interview me, so I had 2 different interviews, one of which had to do with a language test, of which, well, the language skills came handy once again, and so I managed to secure an Insight program at Bloomberg. This was my first office experience, and even though it was just 1 week, for 19-year-old me, this was pretty awesome. There, I learned about the financial markets, the different market players, and I got to use the famous Bloomberg terminal. And speaking of learning in the business world, let me talk about Trends. It's a thriving community where ambitious people gather to learn, workshop, and collaborate. They're a team of entrepreneurs, analysts, and journalists tracking up-and-coming startups, new industries, and interesting ideas. If they find something that you should know, they'll send you a signal so you can learn more about it months before they pop. Once you get a signal, you can also go to the Trends community where you can network, and some of the people have even found their co-founders and investors there. Lastly, they hold meetups and live sessions with professionals ranging from startup founders to executives. Examples of success stories from members using Signal include Narek, who raised 1.5 million for an indoor plant business after hearing about it on Trends, or Chris, who read a Trends article about anything as a service and is now generating 6 figures in revenue. So if you're interested in checking it out, you can get a 7-day trial for just $1 using the link in the description below. Alright, back to the video. Around the spring of year 2 came the big news. I was accepted to Cornell University as a transfer, and I was pretty stoked about it. I knew that moving to the States was gonna be quite a big shift, but it was only for the last 2 years, and I felt like getting an Ivy League degree could open up quite a few more doors for me. Now my resume was slightly more attractive, with Cornell as education and Marriott and Bloomberg as experience. So with the updated resume, I got to work at PwC in the summer between my second and my third year as a financial audit intern. And I was really happy with this. I was finally getting to apply some of my university courses into my internship. My days consisted of using Excel and accounting to make sure the financial statements of our clients were accurate. I got to work in the client's office, as it's usually the case in financial audit, so as a 20-year-old me, it was quite interesting to get to see offices in different industries and what their workday looked like. In my case, I was lucky enough to get to audit a car manufacturer as well as a real estate fund. Looking towards my third year, I knew that having a Big 4 on my resume would be a good boost. Then, between my third and fourth year of university, I got the internship that most of you probably know me from, which is at Goldman Sachs as an investment banking summer analyst in New York. And again, my language skills came handy here as well. Although my team was based in New York, because a lot of the work was actually in Latin America, in my case I spoke Spanish fluently, so that was a big edge over other candidates that maybe didn't speak Spanish or Portuguese. As for what I did there, well, you can check out my day in the life video where I talk about it in more detail, but in short, a lot of PowerPoint and Excel. Things like creating decks to send to clients, updating financial models, or conducting market research. Around this time, I realized that I wanted to go back to Europe after graduation, so I decided against staying in New York or the US in general and began looking for options closer to home. As I went back to university for my final year, after a few months, the pandemic hit and I was sent back home earlier than I expected. There I did one last internship at a tech startup in the delivery space called Glovo, which is somewhat similar in the US equivalents to DoorDash or Uber Eats. Specifically, I was in their financial planning and analysis team, and as for why I did it, well, I was gonna go into a corporate role on a full-time basis after that, so I felt like it'd be nice to try out a tech startup and see what that's like and maybe even consider if that's something that I wanna do further down the line. From what I saw, everything was much more up in the air. If I wanted to change or improve something, I didn't have to go through compliance and get it approved. Instead, I just had to ask my manager, and if I got the yes, then I could go ahead and do it. Also, I was given a lot more responsibility than in previous roles. I ran a few different projects, both in finance as well as in strategy, and this time around, instead of just updating Excel models, I was in charge of creating them from scratch. On the downside, it being a startup, it obviously had a lot more uncertainty. It was quite normal to get some last-minute changes or requests. Also, given the business model, you didn't quite know if there was gonna be new regulation and things like that because the app delivery space was relatively new, and at the same time because even though the company had a billion-plus valuation, it wasn't quite profitable yet, so that meant that fundraising was always in the back of their heads. On the whole though, all of these internship experiences were very positive, and I'm glad that I put myself out there as I felt like I learned something from each one of them. Also, they were all paid, which is appreciated, especially for students. The only one that wasn't was Bloomberg because it was an insight program, so it was only a week long, but they did cover my costs. For their actual internships, they do pay there as well. After all these internships, I went on to a full-time role, so that's the end of the internship cycle. If you want to find out more about how I actually got the internships, how I applied, etc., let me know in the comments if you want a video just on that. If you want to find out more about my resume, check out this video over here. And if you want to find out some cover letter tips, check out this other video over here. That's all for this one. Hit that like, hit that subscribe if you liked it, and I'll catch you in the next one.